The genre of the scrolling beat-em-up is one of many great gaming memories, and one that is long overdue for a comeback, so we're going to have a rundown of the greatest kick-ass scrolling beat-em-ups, visiting some favourites, some you may have missed, and others you have yet to find. As we take to the streets for some fisticuff action today, we're going to visit up and down the timeline, coming at you in no strictly particular order. So hit a like, hit up a subscribe, and get ready to kick back and watch what we do on the streets. So Renegade is where we're going to start. It's a great start because it set the standard formula for the genre. It came out of Technos Japan, Taito, prior to Double Dragon, and you took on thug-like enemies using left to right attacks and jumping attacks before taking on some stronger weapon-wielding ones and bosses. Once players cleared a stage, you were free to move to the right and take on to the next scene, where the tried and trusted story, certainly of the 80s, where you had to be rescuing your girlfriend from a street gang. In terms of development, when the European and American localization happened of the Japanese original, there was an attempt to alter the art style and the presentation to the movie of The Warriors, which takes us to the next step. The Warriors, riding high, 2005 GTA Rockstar Games released The Warriors, a video game that was made originally for the PlayStation and the original Xbox, and there's also appealed to the PSP. The Warriors was extremely well received by critics and gamers alike. It kept the star on the end of the 1977 movie, that actually was based on the 1965 book of the same name. He took on the role of Warlord across the streets of New York City, accompanied by minions. No, not those ones. You were tagging, graffiti, you were stealing from shops and cars, there's mugging civilians. You pretty much had the ability to pick up anything and use it as a weapon. The great soundtrack, fantastic multiplayer, The Warriors is richly deserving of a play and pick up any time. An often overlooked title, in fact, in Europe is something what was known over here as Street Gangs, although to the majority of the world it's called River City Ransom, where you played as Ryan and Alex. You took on members of various gangs of students, such as the Jocks, the Generic Dudes and the Squids, and their gang leaders acted as the bosses. Great about River City Ransom, the Street Gangs, I'm ready to call it on the tip of my tongue there. It really was well ahead of its time. The games featured it kind of had an open world style. There was loads of role-playing elements in there as well. You had leveling up stats for fights. You could gain money to buy books to pick up new techniques. They could be found on enemies as well. And you'd spend your hard-fought cash on food and attribute points. There's like multiple ports as well and revisions that have come down the years, including the most recent one, which is what I'm playing right now, is the Nintendo 3DS Virtual Console version. In 1988, the SNK released POW Prisoner of War, also known as Datsugoku. You took on the role of military prisoner who breaks free from his cell, taking on enemies through the base before eliminating their leader and finding your way to freedom. Beyond the arcade release, there was a port to the Nintendo NES with some changes, including some new bosses and new enemies. And here we are now. Gotham has finally come to an end, and our Batman fix is currently on hold as we wait, of course, for Arkham Knight around the corner. You can break out the SNES from the cupboard and plug in a game of Batman Returns. And unlike many film-to-game releases, which usually turn out all too often to not be very good at all, especially the superhero ones, although it's still Spider-Man 2 for the win, Batman Returns went bare-knuckle against the Red Triangle Circus Gang and its trusted Batarang, of course. Batman even got a chance to ride in the Batmobile, which hasn't happened now until Batman Arkham Knight, and he had to use some machine guns to take out enemies. The graphics were bright, the sound was good, and it was even adapted from the original movie score as well. Batman Returns received the Best Licensed Game Award from Electronic Gaming Monthly in 1992. Still holds up pretty decent today as well. Capcom, Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, two things that really shouldn't go together. This was 1993, Spielberg's Jurassic Park with a huge hit. Dinosaurs are all the rage, pun intended, and the Cadillacs and Dinosaurs was a tie-in to a very short-lived Cadillacs and Dinosaurs animated series. The game was more fondly remembered of the two, though, with 4-player co-op, a twist of dinosaurs, actually that were running neutrally in the game, and that would either attack the enemies or the players, especially if you go over and punch one. Of course, they're not going to be not too friendly about that, they're going to come over and bite your ass. But Cadillacs and Dinosaurs had tons of moves, it had loads of enemy types as well, great graphics, had a good musical score, and it never received a home console release, and remains to this day an arcade exclusive. Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, though, had built on the success before it that was made by the benchmark of Final Fight. Originally set under the title of Street Fighter 89, set in the fictional Metro City, ruled from the underbelly by the criminal Mad Gear gang, newly elected mayor and awesome pro wrestler Hagar had his daughter Jessica kidnapped by Mad Gear. Now Hagar, Jessica's boyfriend Cody, and his best friend ninjutsu practitioner Guy set out to take the streets back and of course rescue the girl. The Final Fight has seen many sequels and ports down the years, and Final Fight did actually amalgamate back into Street Fighter somewhat, with Cody and Guy rejoining the Street Fighter Alpha series. And a game that also is fondly remembered from only a few years ago, in fact, Dragon Crown from Vanillaware and Atlas. It was released on the PlayStation 3 and the PS Vita. Dragon Crown was a decidedly modern take on the scrolling brawler, set in the mythical fantasy and medieval world of sorcery and swords. 4 players work together, either local or online, and crossplay happening between the Vita and the PS3. Players can choose one of 6 character archetypes and battle through various environments, labyrinths and catacombs, defeating enemies using attacks, combos, magic and collectible offensive weapons, mixing it up with some bombs and crossbows as well. And of course it was all for the recovery of an ancient and powerful relic, the Dragon's Crown, which granted you even more abilities. Dragon's Crown was the best-selling digital game on PlayStation Network in Japan in 2013, and a game I have yet to actually pick up. How bad's that? And Marvel, with its backing of Disney now, has all the media pretty much taken by storm in the last few years. Of course, you've seen the amount of movies that are coming out, clothing lines that are everywhere. Now, while we wait for the tie-up of this massive Marvel universe on the silver screen, in 1991 it was happening in games. That's right, Captain America, Hawkeye, Iron Man and Vision of the Avengers took their fists to the streets in a 4-player co-op battle against the forces of Red Skull, which had assembled henchmen and supervillains to band together. As of course you can guess it, the supervillains, they want to take over the world. We had Sentinels, the Mandarin, Juggernaut, Ultron and of course the Red Skull. And to its credit, it had some good ideas. When you collect power-ups, you are briefly assisted by the likes of Quicksilver, Namor, Wasp, Wonder Man. There's been a variety of conversions to home systems over the time. It has aged quite badly though, but you can see what they were trying to do. Sticking with the Marvel Universe, you have the fondly remembered and still highly played XMen Arcade, namely due to its 6-player co-op. Players took the choice and in many cases fought over who controlled the likes of Cyclops, Colossus, Storm, Nightcrawler, Dazzler and Wolverine. Players through an army of Sentinels, Reaver Knights of the Hellfighter Club, Mystique, Juggernaut, before Magneto kidnaps off with Professor X and Kitty Pryde as the battle continued on Asteroid M. It was a lot of fun arcade. I can remember going down the arcades and playing this myself. XMen Arcade received a HD remake for the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation Network service, and packed in with matchmaking and online play. Unfortunately, if you missed it, you've missed out because the game has actually been delisted now. Delisted in 2013. It sucks, man. It sucks. We will continue, however, to roll in Marvel one more time for a forgotten gem, in fact, The Punisher. Developed by Capcom and ported to the Sega Mega Drive Genesis, Marvel's The Punisher, it was violent and it was enjoyable, and it perfectly captured the attitude of the anti-hero Frank Castle, and indeed Player 2's role as Nick Fury. New York City was the war zone, using lead pipes, knives, baseball bats, attacks, jumping strikes, and obligatory specials. Along with the unusual for the genre at the time, guns. He had an Ingram handgun, he had an M16. Punisher marked the first title also, the partnership between Marvel and Capcom. So going forward a few years there to Guardian Heroes, originally released on the Sega Saturn, 1996. I had this, I still have it today, and re-released as a HD remake on 360, PlayStation Network and PC. Guardian Heroes came from Treasure, famed for the likes of Gunstar Heroes on the Mega Drive. It is a true masterpiece. The strength of the title lies in its battle system, branching stories, multiple endings. There's 40 plus playable characters, and I'm pretty sure on the Sega Saturn actually there was more. I'm sure it was 52, but someone's going to need to confirm that for me. Players can be leveled up through an RPG style stat system. There's some gorgeous looking sprites, great music, 6-player, even for Sega Saturn. Look, I've got my multiplayer adapter here, however I never had enough pads. You can download yourself the HD remake online as well. You can play co-op and you can battle, and this really was a retro game done right. We've got to stick with Sega actually. Let's take a grab in here at Sega's Spike Out. That's right, in 1997-98 there was a 3D scrolling beat 'em up from Sega's legendary AM2 division. It followed the formula of attacks and jumps and specials, had a nice dose of Virtua Fighter combos in there, and running on an updated model of Sega's Model 3 arcade board, bringing fists your way, bosses. I don't recall them being that much of a story. It was kind of generic enemies and bosses. There was a number of variants also released at the arcade. One was Slash Out, which is kind of a medieval version of Spike Out. And in fact, on the Xbox, in 2005, they released the exclusive Spike Out Battle Streak, and I spent many an hour in there with UK Arclan. There was tons of unlockable characters. There was even rumours of Blaze and Axel being amongst them, however that was unfounded. So let's go back in time slightly to 1991. Simpsons was high on TV. I think everyone watched The Simpsons at that time, and it was an unlikely video game from Konami. It found its way into the arcade. Simpsons the arcade game. Smithers had made off with Maggie. After a diamond robbery, Bart, Homer, Lisa and Marge go in pursuit across Krusty Land, Moe's Tavern, a weird dream world I recall, and a Simpsons nuclear power plant where everyone loves to go. Hence there was a face-off between Smithers and also against Mr. Burns. It was a 4-player stroller, there was hoovers, skateboards, it was a lot of fun. It had a really vibrant animation as well, some colourful characters. And it still stands out even today. Simpsons Arcade found itself have a re-release update to Xbox Live Arcade and PlayStation Network in 2012. Although a quick look before I started recording this, it has now actually been removed. Boom! There's a lot of people need to play this. So let's stick with Capcom now. With energy gloves to the power of electricity, Capcom, Captain Commando. He originates from the name Capcom itself, Cap and Com, Captain Commando. Now his first appearance actually as a game character actually goes back to 1986. He had a ray gun in each hand, with a large C on his neck, and he actually was on the case of most Capcom games. He was like a fictional spokesman used by Capcom America, and then capped in 1991. Some 5 years after that first appearance, he finally got himself a game. It's well remembered in nostalgia. It mirrored Capcom's other fighter as well, Final Fight, in the same button configuration. Captain Commando had 4 playable characters, and it was a futuristic version of Metro City, also from Final Fight. It hasn't aged too well, to be absolutely honest with you, but it's a lot of fun. It's if you want to go back and have a bit of a scroll and a beam up, it's worth doing certainly for an hour or so. And it is, of course, the fun arcade game. But bringing ourselves forward to 2010, Scroll and Beamers did continue somewhat. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World being one to wrench out of that lineup there. It was based on the graphic novels and tying into the films released. It was published by Ubisoft. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, and you're battling through with one of 4 characters, Scott, Ramona, Kim Pine or Stephen Hills. You went on to battle through a number of stages to defeat Ramona's several evil exes. You have to kind of wonder, she went through 7 crazy psycho boyfriends. With logic on your side, this is not the stable girl to go out with. They're not getting coerced by her to go kick your ex's asses. Yeah. But Scott Pilgrim anyway, apart from the story, it's definitely a great nod to classic beat 'em up. Characters were bright, there's tons of moves, loads of references to the likes of Mega Man, River City Ransom, even stuff in there from like Mario and Kirby. It's good fun. 2010, you can still buy that now as a digital release. Now, let's go back to the year of great movies of the 80s, 1984, Terminator, Ghostbusters and stuff. So, we also saw the release of the grandfather of the genre, Kung Fu Master. So Kung Fu Master actually was created as a tie-in to a film. It was Jackie Chan's Meals on Wheels. It also was bizarrely named Spartan X at first release. Strikes and kicks and jump attacks are the order of the day. As you battle through, you rise up from the floors of the Devil's Temple. So it kind of gave it a bit of a Bruce Lee Game of Death style take about it. But it wasn't just about taking on attackers. You had loads of guys throwing knives at your enemies that could grab you too. If you went onto the even numbered floors, there was like enemies who were snakes, there was dragons, there was falling pots. Each floor had a boss that was called the Son of a Devil, and created a number of standards for the genre. It isn't strictly a side-scrolling beat-em up, but it did kind of lay the groundwork. The producer of Kung Fu Master, Takashini Nishiyama, who also was the creator of Street Fighter, and they then went on to leave Capcom to go to SNK, and created the Neo Geo arcade board. So we have a lot to thank that guy for. In 1991, now, Rare developed a title was the first in the installment of the Battletoads series, originally for the Nintendo NES in 1991, and known for being very hard and crazy, humorous ways of defeating foes. Like when punching a guy, punching like his fist would expand as you punch him off the screen. And it was good comic style fun. It was colourful, it was creative, and Battletoads went afterwards. They went on to team up with Jimmy and Billy with a crossover with Double Dragon in 1993. It was the Battletoads Double Dragon crossover, and that was fondly remembered also. In 1994 you had the SNES version, it was Super Battletoads, which was essentially a remix. And literally soon after, I can't remember if it was at the same time or just after, there was the arcade version of Battletoads as well, and it was much more bloodier. It was like there was even decapitations in there. It's a great shame that that version, which is the better version, kind of dark humour that kind of suited it to, never made it to a home audience. In 1989, Sega brought us to the fictional land of Uria. It's a world of high fantasy, a world very similar to that of Conan the Barbarian. It was, of course, Golden Axe. In terms of an original story, it had Death Adder, he had Count the King, and his daughter, and it was up to Axe Battler the Barbarian who didn't use an axe, our warrior Dwarf Gillies Thunderhead, and the Red Sonja like Tourist Flare. It was a great side-scrolling beat-em-up. It had the ability to ride creatures, whipping tail, shoot fireballs, coupled with elemental magic, even dragons. Golden Axe has gone on to spawn a number of sequels and independent developments as well, such as Golden Axe Legends for the Beats of Rage engine, which we're going to be touching on a little bit later. Yeah, Golden Axe was good fun, and it's worth still picking up. You can find loads of collections too. Unfortunately, Sega did do an update of that actually for the Xbox 360. The game just featured Tourist Flare and it was a bit more like a 3D action adventure. Unfortunately, it wasn't well received at all. Unlike Castle Crashers, first unveiled in that same year, 2006, when it was originally going to be shown as a GameCube release. That never happened, I might add. Behemoth Studios were the team behind Alien Hominid. They did eventually get Castle Crashers out to the 360 in 2008, and later I think it was 2010 when it went to PlayStation Network and PC. Positive reviews all round. It was a side-scrolling beat-em-up. There was loads of RPG elements in there as well. And a 4-player co-op set in a fictional medieval universe. It was your typical story. A dark wizard comes along, arrives, steals a gem, and of course takes the promised princesses. Of course, it's up to you with your multicoloured knights to rescue the gem, rescue the king's daughters, and set the world to rights. There's some fun mini-games as well. There was one that had you taking on like enemies in waves, a bit like, say, like Halo's Firefight. And there was this really strange mode where it was like a bit like an all-you-can-eat buffet. You had to eat as much as you can, very silly. Paladin, one of the game's developers, he said River City Ransom was his primary inspiration for the game's style, and noted the character's expressions, of course, are based straight on that. And they also took influence the likes of Guardian Heroes, Final Fight, and Double Dragon. So here we are, Double Dragon. It's hard not to mention it this far down. I really wanted to kind of leave the bigger boys a bit further down in the list. But Double Dragon, we're going to pretend that a number of things don't exist, as many Double Dragon fans do. The Double Dragon movie doesn't exist, and the one-on-one Mortal Kombat-like games do not exist, so we're going to ignore them. In 1987, though, the game took the world by storm, and that was Double Dragon. It was the spiritual successor to Renegade. Billy and Jimmy fought their way across turfs of slums, woods, industrials, to an enemy-like temple hideout of the gang of the Black Warriors to rescue the love triangle interest called Maria, or Marion, I seem to recall. I think I've seen it listed as both. You employed a vast arsenal of attacks, as did the enemies as well. I got my ass handed to me many times. Weapons were found across the stage and also dropped by foes. The first time I played Double Dragon, in fact, was at my mate's house, my mate Mark's house. He had a Sega Master System and I didn't, and we spent so many hours. There's been dozens of releases and dozens of versions down the years, including the most recent 80s style synth-fest, that is Double Dragon Neon. Homage, I say, to 80s gameplay mechanics, cheesy one-liners, and nostalgic nods. Core Design, based initially at Derby, developer behind the original Tomb Raider and their fighting game, they had one in the mix, and it was going to be called Streets of Rage 4. That's right, Streets of Rage 4 was going to be developed, and it was going to be published by Sega exclusively for the Sega Saturn. However, there was a licensing disagreement after Sega found out that they were going to port it also to the PlayStation and the N64, so Sega pulled the license back and went, hey, no, you can't do that. Not that they actually used a bizarre hybrid between Nazis and Japanese language there, they didn't do that. They just basically, pulled the license from them, and the game took on a new name called Fighting Force, and it was still going to come to the Sega Saturn, although it didn't actually get published. Though I did see a copy of that running at a Games Expo in 1997, and in fact there was a disc lying there on the table, like data side down as well, begging to be taken, and I never took it. I really should do that. And now we've got to see it again because the game never came out, damn it. Unfortunately, the game only had just about above average review when it came out, but it does remain a playable title, albeit it's aged in its PlayStation 1 level graphics. 3D is not brilliant, but Hawk and Lana looking very similar to Axel and Blaze, along with Ben and Mace. Now, each character had their own reasons for going after the evil Dr. Zhang, the criminal mastermind. You fought across the police station, there was a shopping mall, there was a subway, before eventually going to Zhang's island base. It was praised at the time though for having interactivity for its background environment. You could literally pick up virtually anything. Poles, bottles, car engines. Fire Force was fun for a bash or two. There was a sequel actually, it came out on the Dreamcast and the PlayStation, but it dropped the Streets of Rage style gameplay and it made it a standard third-person stealth-based shooter based solely around the one character of Hawk. It didn't do brilliant, but Fire Force 3 was cancelled mid-production, and there's a few videos and stuff you can see on YouTube about that. So what then does that leave us with? I'm sure if you're counted down, you're wondering where your favourite is, if it hasn't already been up already. Let's jump now to Dungeons & Dragons, and honestly, what doesn't have a Dungeons & Dragons name on it? From card games to tabletop games to books, a fondly remembered animated series, which, when you watch it back, is pretty cringeworthy. There was movies and dozens of video games to boot. However, the one that is regularly reminisced is the side-scrolling beat-em-up with a dose of RPG action thrown in for good measure from Capcom. Who else? Released in 1993 with a sequel soon after called Dungeons & Dragons Shadow of Mysteria. Up to 4 players taking on the roles of a cleric, dwarf, elf or fighter, and taking on many of the iconic Dungeons & Dragons enemies such as trolls and shadow elves, Flamewig and of course Demios acting as your final boss. As you battle through the scrolling screens, you have multiple routes taken, and meaning that each playthrough can be different. You have vested in your basic attacks, yet actually there was a secondly kind of complex system of stronger attacks, turning moves, crouching and evading, as well as elves and clerics in possession of a large number of spells and magical abilities. And it was also outfitted with a variety of moves to thwart your progress as well. It's a great title, especially when working together. It has seen home releases on the Sega Saturn. I got one myself in a 2-in-1 release, only in Japan mind, and thankfully in 2013 Capcom's D&D games came to Xbox Live Arcade, PSN, Nintendo eShop and PC to be enjoyed the world over, especially over here in the West, and I finally managed to read what the story was all about when I got to play it again. Now, revisiting Sega right now, we're going to go to Sega's AM1 arcade studio to a game that was known as Dynamite Decker and is released in the West under the license title of Die Hard Arcade, although without Bruce Willis's face though, and it was your job to save the President's daughter. There was a strange subplot that was missed in the Die Hard movies, and you employ a wide variety of virtual fighter-like combos and wrestling moves. So yippee-ki-yay it is to a brainbuster, and lots of items that can be picked up in the environment such as brooms and even rocket launchers. It quite innovated the genre in all fairness. There was cutscenes featuring QTE sequences, where failing meant you had to take on either another group of enemies or face some kind of new danger. What was really quite cool is the Sega Saturn version of Dynamite Decker, or in this case Die Hard Arcade. It featured the 1979 Sega game called Deep Scan, where for each successful enemy you destroyed it yielded a continue in the game. And we quite liked that, it was a really good idea. There was a sequel as well that was available over here in the West, dropping the Die Hard moniker and resuming its title for Dynamite, but it became called Dynamite Cop, Dynamite Cop 2 at the arcade, and it had a Dreamcast release. There was 3 playable characters and there was multiple entries to each level, so it actually meant you had multiple endings for the way the story revolved and opened differently. Of course you had to save the President's daughter again, and the fun came from the over-the-top wrestling moves continued, however the acting was down a bit. It was a lot of fun. And there's a lot to be said for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. In 1989, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was the absolute rage, although here in the UK it wasn't called Ninja Turtles, it was called Hero Turtles. It was so badly dubbed on the animated series. It was possibly the most in-demand arcade machine that year, and it's still played today with fondness wherever you can find it today. It's from Konami, and the Deluxe Arcade Cabinet Edition had 4 players where you could take control of Raphael, Leonardo, Michelangelo and Donatello. Everyone had been kidnapped as well as Splinter, and there's a fire, and it was time to put down the pizza and hit the streets. The multicoloured swap foot soldiers actually made up the majority of the enemies, and they had different their different colours represented how they attacked you and the weapons they carried. Pizzas provided health, and the bosses assembled the animated series as well, so you had Bebop, Rocksteady, Baxter, Stockman, Krang, Shredder. They made up a majority of the bosses. The home versions were abound, and there have been many sequels to those down the years. The most fondly remembered being Turtles 4, Turtles in Time, and in 2007, Turtles 1989 Arcade Classic was released on Xbox Live Arcade. And unfortunately, like many of these titles, they've now been removed due to licensing.
This cave is creepy.
If you've been keeping positive tabs on the games that we've been ticking down, you know there's a few biggies still to come. Let's talk about then the to-be-forgotten movie release counterparts and ignore them. Alien vs Predator franchise is really best known when it comes to the graphic novels and the Capcom-created arcade machine. Famous for not being ported to any home system, and it was released 21 years ago, last week at the time of recording. It remains as beautiful today as it does when it came out. It was on the CPS System 2 Jammer board. It was the same board responsible for Street Fighter Alpha series and the Marvel-themed titles. Now, Alien vs Predator went for a joystick 3-button setup, so you had attack, jump, shoot. It was 3-player co-op as well, You had two cyborg human soldiers, Dutch and Lynn, and a Predator Hunter and a Predator Warrior. Basically, the story was that California was being overrun by aliens. Dutch and Lynn were swarmed, they were cornered, and all of a sudden these two Predators jump in to join the honourable fight and work together to stop the infestation. It had gorgeous graphics, as it still does today, special effects, and it was amongst the best looking beat 'em up games of the 16-bit era, according to Kotaku, and definitely the case. In 1998, Sega released the Sega Dreamcast, and on one of the second wave titles that came out was one that's fondly remembered, was Dombey Revenge. It was a key title. It took place in the world of House of the Dead. In fact, the game was originally called House of the Dead Blood Bullet. But Dombey Revenge was a 3D scrolling beat 'em up. It was a fun title, and it took the beat 'em up formula of laying the smackdown, but on zombies this time. 3 characters. They were the officers from the AMS. There was Linda, the Raika, and the guy called Stick Brightling, I seem to recall. And they basically was sent out to eliminate the enemy, track down the leader of the zombie horde. I think his name was Zed. And it was hand-to-hand combat, guns all the way. There's numerous references to House of the Dead, and I seem to recall there was a visit to the Kurian mansion in there as well. Sega's answer to Capcom's Final Fight and Taito's Double Dragon hit arcades and consoles in 1991, known as Bareknuckle. This is Streets of Rage, Axel, Blaze and Adam in a city where even the police are controlled by the criminal syndicate led by the mysteriously titled Mr. X. Crime is rampant, which leads to the 3 heroes making a pact to leave the force and topple the syndicate for themselves. They do have support in the form of the police, though a police car and a chopper whose driver would fire a rocket were working effectively like a screen wipe smart bomb. The player would often save these until the bosses. But most memorable about Streets of Rage is its use of sound. Its soundtrack was created by Yuzo Koshiro and later by Motohiro Kawashima, influenced by electronic dance, techno and rave, and instantly recognisable style. Sega struck gold in the sequel though, dropping Kickboxer in terms of the storyline, Adam for wrestler Max, and Adam's younger brother Skate joining the fray. They took on Street Fighter-like special moves now. There was a greater range of attacks, there was front and back grapples, further tag team moves, weapons can now be thrown, there was semi-specials as well, like a double tap forward and attack. Enemies now have names, and the second sequel, Streets of Rage 3, went straight to console release in 1994. They gave us finally a 6-button control system, as well as multiple endings, longer levels, new abilities. Every character can now dash. There was hidden characters too, Shiva, there was Rue, and there was Ash if you could play with action replay. And there was Max was dropped in favour of the cybernetic Blanka-like Dr. Zam. The English version was actually made quite hard. Most notably, the game's normal in the UK, and the Europe edition was actually harder than the Japanese hard mode. Now, Streets of Rage would not have another home release, or even a release until completely skipping the Saturn, completely skipping the Dreamcast. Of course, that was going to be Fighting Force, but we've spoken about that earlier. We had to wait, in fact, until the Sega Mega Drive Genesis collection that appeared on the Xbox, GameCube, and PS2 just to get your hands on it again. And since then, we've not had a proper sequel at all, and it's now been 21 years since Streets of Rage 3 was released. It hasn't stopped determined fans and game coders. Streets of Rage Remake, a title 8 years in the making by a handful of home code developers from Bomber Games. Streets of Rage Remake version 5 was released to humongous applause a few years ago, but soon after, Sega issued a cease and desist against the developers, which only led to further interest in the title. Seeing the return of the full cast and numerous secret characters, in fact there's 18 playable characters in version 5, including a certain blue hedgehog. Unlockables a far extended moves list, running specials, real character shadows, special effects, and branching paths. In fact, every door pretty much you could go through, they cut it open into a multi-branch path. And the return of context-based police support, there was a completely recreated homage soundtrack. Now we could end it there, we could round it down there, finishing on Streets of Rage Remake. However, an honourable nudge of love has to go out to the guys at the Beats of Rage team, originally the Senile team, and maintained by the peeps at Chrono Crash and the Open Bore engine. It was an engine, and is an engine, that has allowed sprites to be added and animated and created, even from various other games, into side-scrolling action games, where it's created a number of new titles, homage titles and many new ones. So before we end, I'm just going to throw a quick montage out there of some of the titles that have been created using the Beats of Rage engine. I really hope I've managed to find your favourites on here, and you've been able to have a bit of a mental reminisce, visiting some of the favourites from down the years. And if there's some that you think I may have missed, you know, please let me know in the comments below and give me a nudge and say, hey, you missed this one. And perhaps I've introduced you to things and titles that you have yet to find. So go and explore them, go and have some fun. My name is Kristian Lander. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me today, and I shall see you on the internet very soon in the future.